Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so too. Yeah, um, yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna get rid of this van at the end of the week this week. So expect a call from me next week, and then we'll put something together. I got a couple other small things that are going in and out, but um, it shouldn't be an issue. Even not even it's tough because a lot of people, especially nowadays, there's less and less people. You know a little bit about cars, so it's a different story with you. But with most people, they don't have any idea. When he's telling me 2,300, 1,100, 2,300, those were only for the bumper. So in other words, the prices that were thrown at me was $400 for a new bumper, but they have no consideration for the splash pan. The splash pan was busted up on it. I repaired it. I ended up repairing the whole thing. I didn't buy no freaking new bumper. So I patched it from behind. I did fiberglass patches, which again are not the best way to repair a bumper because they're actually rubber bumpers. They're more plastic and rubber than they are fiberglass. So you got to grind them and you put the fiberglass patches on them, but you're only going to get 5, 6 years out of a fiberglass patch before it starts pulling away and that kind of thing too. But again, if for a car that he's not even going to have it in 6 years, it's going to be gone because it's already got the mileage on it. The thing when I seen it, when he finally showed up with it, I was like, I don't know why you ever wanted to do that. I said, why, I was trying to talk him into. Well, I would fix it, but I know what I told him over the phone. What I told him over the phone was, why don't you just put a couple zip ties on the fucking thing and put it back on? From what I can see in the picture, you got a couple pieces missing, and you need to get back and forth to work. He was getting rides for the last 2, 3 weeks back and forth to work because didn't want to drive the car without the front bumper on. And I said he ripped out the light sockets and that kind of stuff. So when he got the prices from the body shop, they didn't include $45 a piece for light sockets times four. They didn't include new bulbs times four, which are $10 bulbs for the one set and $8 for the others a piece. They didn't consider the mounting brackets, the braces, which I know from offhand they go for about 30, 35 bucks a piece. So his were broken. I didn't even put them back on. What I did was I slid it on and I zip tied all the bottom stuff that was broken. I zip tied it, and then at the end, I'm telling him at the end, I'm like, and that's why he got out of the whole thing for 500 bucks. What I was trying to let him know is that he could have got out of the whole thing for 200, 300 bucks if he would have just did what I was suggesting to him, which was fix the bumper up, patch it up, fucking paint it black or the closest red that I can get to your red, because it's not really gonna. But when I seen how freaking happy he was with the job when it was done, I would not have been happy myself because I'd say, why the fuck am I putting $500 into a car to, especially something like that? It's not like it's gonna stop it from running. You know what I mean? It's not gonna. I'm not gonna be broken down because the bumper's got a piece missing out of it, because that's all it would have been was one of the. It was broken into a lot of pieces, but he had. It's another good thing is he had all the pieces, so he collected them from his driveway, and that was another thing, another reason I said, even if you didn't have all the pieces, I would still just fiberglass the damn thing and be done with it. I wouldn't get carried away like, oh well, that's why we said, you can get a new bumper for $4. They're not thinking that that bumper that they get for $4 is going to be missing all the other pieces that also had to be fixed. So now you're looking at more like $700-800 just for the bumper shit, and then plus the brackets and all that. Now you just added another 6-7 hours of time, labor, to doing it all. So why don't we just simplify the whole thing? You'll get the bumper will still be there when that car's dead. I guarantee. I'll tell you that the bumper that I fixed will still be looking just as good as it. The car's got scratches all over the fucking place, and it's all fucking fucked up. And he's worried about it. It was an '04. It's an '04. GMC, one of those SUV type GMCs, and mhm. Yeah, so I mean, even when they were going to claim totaled on it because the insurance company didn't even want to deal with it, and they said, "Why are you going to pay $500 a deductible per year, or 400, whatever it was, and then you're gonna pay the original deductible, and then for 3 years we're gonna nail you. It's not worth it, to do it through us. We probably would just total it at this point. If you're getting prices of 2,300 to fix it, then the book value on it's only 2 grand." So when he called me on it, and I was like, "Yeah, it doesn't really make sense. I understand you wanted to look nice and everything, but it will look nice if I paint it black. It don't look outrageous to have black bumpers. If you want, I can even do the repair and angle my tape so that I just doing black on each side of the bumper, and then I'll do the back bumper to match, and you'll still get out of it for $200, $300 tops. Instead, he wanted to. So I said, okay, it doesn't really matter to me. I said, if you want, I'm just letting you know that extra 140, $200 is just going to be materials because I got to buy some spray bombs, and that's what I did. more for your money. Oh no, no, I would no, I'd set you up right away. I'd work it out before you was here on the road. You set up. I'd just make yourself a phone call because whenever Mako's not doing it, even if Mako's not doing it, they'll do it anyway. And if you call me and you say, listen, I need you to run your specials, you know, because if you run your specials, no, I'm not putting any freaking is under your situation where I don't want it outside in the primer and give me the same. They'll do it in a heartbeat. And then another trick to the Mako thing is if West Springfield's not running their specials, then one of the other Makos will be because they all run at a different time. So that would, you know, that's not an issue here. Even if it was the cost of the toll of saying, you know, I'm gonna spend another $250 to tow it over to Mako, $250 to tow it, but you got a friend that's towing for you, so even that is not really a big deal for you, you know. No, no, I'll do it. I'm gonna do it, but then when I'm done, I'll be able to say, remember those conversations we had? You know? I'll tell you what, the other guy, I did the same thing to the guy with the bumper over the weekend, and that was another thing too. They were going to have his truck for 2 weeks. I did it in one day, 10 hours. I charged him $20 an hour because he's a good friend. Yeah, so he's a good friend. So you know, he probably worked in other cars before, so I was able to do it. But I did the same thing to him that I'm doing to you now. That's why I was calling you a bumper story, and I tried talking him out of it, and to see how happy he was, and I just said to myself, okay. factories use it. That's what watching the factories use it all these years. Saying to myself, this is fucking ridiculous because what they use is they use panel adhesive and they use crimping tools and the machines are crimpers, and that's how they do it all. You hardly see any welds on anything anymore. Even if you got a front end damage and you have to take the whole radiator support out, they're never held in with welds anymore. They're always those little dimples. They got these little dimpler machines that come in and just go and they make a dimple into the metal, heat it up and dimple it. And those are the dimples that we're drilling out. There's no welds anywhere anymore. It's pretty amazing actually. And then Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, everywhere we go, everything's doubling in cost. I know. All right, Joe. All right, sounds good. Stay in touch. I'll call you. I'll call you next week when I'm all done. All right. All right. Bye. The fuck is that thing? I absolutely love this guy now, Peterson. I gotta do a series to him after I'm done with the Candace Owens and Pastor Brooks series. He's Canadian.
So the question here is the loss of freedom of speech, the corruption of the universities, the rise of China, which is in all kinds of ways a more formidable opponent than the Soviet Union was. In all kinds of ways, one could argue that we're in a worse position now than we were in the 70s. And so what I want to know is, are you speaking to those few who have eyes to see and ears to hear? Do you believe that we are capable? Do you hope to prompt another kind of restoration? Or is Jordan Peterson the fascinating, eloquent, compelling champion of a lost cause?
Well, I mean, when I spent a lot of time at the various universities I was associated with studying motivation for atrocity, because I was very curious about that as a psychologist, not as a sociologist or an economist or a political scientist. You're an Auschwitz guard, okay, what's motivating you as an individual? And I wanted to understand it well enough so that I could understand how I could do that, because one answer to that is, well, that sort of behavior is so far beyond the pale that it's completely incomprehensible. It's just a manifestation of, say, like intense psychology. A normal person can't even imagine it. And I think, the evidence doesn't really suggest that, because it isn't obvious that all the people involved in the Nazi were criminally pathological, that they were deviations, like incomprehensible deviations from the norm. It'd be lovely to think that, and it would make the world a lot simpler, but I think the evidence And so I tried to understand that, and I think I did to some degree, although we can't go into that. A fair bit of that's a consequence of envy. It's the spirit of Cain, I would say, if you had to sum it up in a phrase. But that isn't the issue. The issue is how do you stop it from happening again? And because that's supposed to be what we're concentrating on, let's say, in the aftermath of the Second World War. Never forget, which should mean something like, how about we don't do this again? And so my question was, well, how do we best go about that, ensuring we don't walk down that road again? And my conclusion was because it was fundamentally an issue of individual psychology, most fundamentally, more than economics, more than sociology. It's the cure is individual. People have to act as ethically as they are powerful, or else. And so I've been trying to convince people to do that, I suppose, or to put forward, not to convince them precisely, but to put forward an argument about why that's necessary and why it's on them. It's like, no, this is on you. You've got to understand this problem. It's you. You don't get it right, it isn't going to work. And so how do you do that? Well, you start with what you have under control in your own life. Because where else are you going to start? You look to yourself. Put your house in order. Don't be worried about some other person walking the satanic path. And that's what activists do all the time. It's you. It's the corporations. Like it's someone else. No. It's you. And I think that's also fundamental to the Judeo-Christian doctrine, is that it's you. It's on you. Redemption's an individual matter. And so my hope is that if enough people take themselves with enough seriousness, then we won't end up in hell. Because we certainly could. It's a high probability. And so, and I also don't think that you can be motivated enough to put your house in order to the degree that's necessary, merely by being attracted, let's say, to the potential utopia that might emerge as a consequence of that. So there'd be a vision of heaven, let's say. No, you need to also be terrified of hell. Think, well, there's no such thing. It's like, just because you haven't been there doesn't mean there's no such thing. It's like you have to be pretty bloody naive to think there's no such thing. But how much evidence do you need? And how does it come about? Well, it comes about, at least in partial consequence of the sins of men. And I think that's true. So I go around and I talk to people. I say, look, there's not only more to you than you know, there's more to you than you can imagine. You have an ethical responsibility to act in that light. And you might claim not to believe that, but I would say, well, your whole culture is predicated on that belief, and insofar as you are an active member of that culture and a believer in its structure, then you believe it. You might not be very good at believing it, you might be full of conflict and doubt, and you might not be able to articulate it, but it's still right at the bedrock of your culture, this notion of what? The divine sovereign individual. Is that not what your culture is predicated on, that idea? The logos inherent in each person? It's something other than that? I've never seen a credible argument made to show that it's anything other than that. You know, you can say, well, rights are attributed to you by the state. So, sorry, that's a weak argument, because the state's dependent on your actions. So, you know, to believe that, you have to believe that the state is the entity, and that individuals are just subordinate in some fundamental sense to the state. So, no, the state is dependent on the individual to exactly the same degree. So we're the active agent of the state, in some sense. We're the seeing eye of the state, the speaking mouth of the state, because the state's dead without the individuals that compose it.
Incoming freshmen next year, University of Toronto, Stanford University, 18-year-old kids coming into this. We've been through 3 years of COVID. I won't rehearse it all.
Mm-hmm.
One sentence. What would you say to them as they begin university at the age of 18 or 19? What's the restorative, the redemptive sentence? What should they do?
Don't be thinking your ambition is corrupt. You know, because that's part of the message now. Human beings were a cancer on the planet. We're headed for an environmental apocalypse. the entire historical structure is nothing but atrocity, etc., etc. Anyone with any ethical aim whatsoever is just going to pull back. You don't want to manifest any ambition, support the patriarchal structure, exploit the environment. You got to crush yourself down. You shouldn't even have any children. It's like, no, there's no excuse for that. There's zero excuse for that. I saw a professor at an event, something like this. He came out and trumpeted this bloody environmentally friendly house he built, and fair enough, man. It was a pretty interesting house, but not everybody had the $4 million that it took him to build it. And I'm not criticizing his money even. It's like, he's had some money, good for him. He built a house, okay. But then to trumpet that as a moral virtue, well, you're pushing it there. And then he came out to all the kids and he said, my wife and I decided that we were only going to have one child. And I think that's one of the most ethical things we could have possibly done. And I would strongly encourage you to do the same. I thought, you son of a bitch. You get up in front of these young people. A lot of these kids were children of first-generation immigrants from China. And he showed all these images, of these terrible factories in China, these endless rows of sterile mechanism that were subordinating all the Chinese people to this terrible, capitalist machine. And I thought, you don't understand. Half the audience is looking at those factories and thinking, that's a hell of a lot better than struggling through the mud under Mao, buddy. And so, I don't know where he thought he was, but to come out in front of all those kids and basically tell them that the whole human enterprise is so goddamn corrupt that the best thing they could possibly do is limit their multiplication, and to think of himself as a scholar and an educator was just, I did say something, by the way. It was rather uncomfortable, and he stomped off the stage. But that's no message for young people. There's no excuse for that. And you think, well, we're going to destroy the planet. We have to do this. We have to demoralize the youth to be ethical. It's like, yeah, really, that's your theory? You're going to demoralize young people to be ethical? That's your theory? It's like, you should go and think about that for like a year. And I'm passionate about this, because you have no idea how many people that's killing. You have no idea. I see people everywhere, all over the world, who are so demoralized, especially young people with a conscience, because they've been told since they were little that there's nothing to them but corruption and power. It's like, how the hell do you expect them to react? I shouldn't do anything, man,
Dr. Jordan Peterson on what was the phrase? The divine sovereign
individual.
Divine
Yeah.
sovereign individual. Thank you. For Uncommon Knowledge, the Hoover Institution, and Fox Nation, I'm Peter Rawlinson.
I can't imagine the circumstances to get any sort of and it has to be the right kind of statement. I read the National Sciences and Engineering Research Council frequently asked questions about how it could prepare and you couldn't write a more reprehensible document from the ideological perspective if you set out with the intent purpose of writing a reprehensible document. And so there's no research. And then my students, what bloody chance do they have to be in higher academic environment today? You know perfectly well, those of you who sat on faculty hiring committees, your basic decision right off the bat is, okay, who do we eliminate? Because you have way too many candidates, and so you're searching for reasons to get rid of people. I'm not saying this as a criticism of you, it's just a reality. And any whiff of scandal, any sort, it's like, we have 10 other people we could look at. Why would we bother with Trump? And so I just couldn't see my students having any future. And then I also thought, well, I can go lecture wherever I want, whenever I want, with virtually any size audience, with no restrictions whatsoever. Why would I go back to teaching a small class at the university? Not that I didn't like that, because I did like it, but all I could see were disadvantages. Plus, it was impossible, so that was why.
So, again from you in the National Post, just exactly what am I supposed to do when I meet a graduate student or young professor hired on diversity grounds? friend to peace and tolerance. It is absolutely and completely the enemy of competence and justice. Close quote. But how did wokeness, we can come to this in a moment too. University faculty, poll after poll, party affiliation in this country, I'm sure it's the same in Canada. The university faculty have been to the left for a long time. But this wokeness is something new. What's the transmission mechanism? What happened? And how did it happen in still a small single-digit number of years?
Yeah, well, that's a tough question, you know? I mean, I've tried to put my finger on the essential elements of what you might describe as political correctness or wokeness, and I've done that a variety of ways. I had a student, for example, this is quite a promising line of research, Christine Brophy was her name. The first thing we wanted to find out was, well, is there really such a thing as political correctness or wokeness? Because it's vague. Yeah, and I meant that psychometrically, because psychologists for 40 years have been trying to, one of the things that psychologists have been wrestling with is construct validation. That's the technical problem. Is how do you know when you put a concept forward whether it bears any relationship to some underlying reality? And so you can think of, well, is there such a thing as emotional intelligence? Is there such a thing as self-esteem? Is there such a thing as political correctness? And so the proper answer to that is, well, we don't know, but there are ways of finding out. And so one of the ways you find out is you want to see if the construct assesses something that's unique and that it does that in a manner